You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again with the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we look a little bit farther afield. We go beyond your SPYs and your VIX and your Tesla options and see what's going on in the world of Bitcoin and ETH and all the other big crypto assets. Going to look at the volume, the volatility, the skew, the open interest, the unusual activity, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, on the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. You guys know where to go if you want to go above and beyond. Engage with our great pro Q&A sessions. I have another great one coming up tomorrow with a short vol legend and also, coincidentally, a blackjack Hall of Famer, legendary blackjack player as well. So I think if you twist his arm, he'll probably want to talk a little bit about blackjack there as well. That's coming up tomorrow with Mr. Don Schlesinger's first time here in the new year in the pro Q&A hot seat. Of course, you have Options Oddities every Friday, giveaways throughout the week, all the live shows you can handle throughout the week as well. Where do you go to get that? theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. And of course, you know where to go to get access to all of the analytics we're going to talk about on the show today. gvol.io. That's Genesis Volatility. That's the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires for all the analytics we're going to break down in Bitcoin and ETH and a whole bunch more. But we have a lot to get to on the show today. Have a great guest to help us do that. I'm pleased to welcome back Mr. Eric Kovalak, the managing partner over there at Vellum Capital. Eric, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program.
Mark, good to be with you. Thank you.
We have a fun one on our hands, an interesting one at the very least. So let's get to it. A little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking about the big dog, Bitcoin, a little bit smaller coming into today's show than it was this time last week. Last show, we were at a little bit north of the 41,000 level, about 41,240. Coming into today's show, a little bit shy of the 40,000 level, about 37,426. when we kicked off the show. We had an interesting range on the week. It looks like a little bit more than about 7,500 points on the upside, and on the downside there we saw about 44.8 or so was the height that was on last Wednesday, and then the low was set this morning, 37, about 3.25 or so. So intriguing stuff afoot out there. 7,500 point range. That's actually pretty decent for Bitcoin. We've obviously seen crazier weeks out there, but still from an overall trading range perspective on the week, nothing to shake a stick at. Of course, a lot of sell-off out there on the broad markets today on the heels of pretty much everything selling off outside of commodities like crude oil and wheat and gold. Outside of that, everything's pretty much red today on the heels of all this Ukrainian friction going on over there. Eric, it's been a while since you've joined us. It's been actually all the way back since last October, so pretty much 5 months. A lot has gone on in the world of crypto and indeed the broad market since the last time we chatted. So perhaps let's start there. Catch us up. What's been lighting up your tape and your radar as you got into the end of the year? Of course, the start of the year, we've had all these exacerbations of Ukrainian tensions, which added some volatility to the overall crypto market, leading, of course, to the big invasion recently, which has added another layer of volatility to the market. So what's all that been like from your perspective over there at Vellum Capital?
Yeah, sure, Mark. It's interesting. I think the last time we talked, we were still in a bull market. It seems like a long time ago. Ever since really basically the end of October, it's been in a secular bear market. I'm sure you've covered with listeners the myriad of different reasons for that, from interest rates to risk off, risk on stuff. But this does seem to persist without relent. At Vellum, we were very aggressive in paring back positions and going back to cash during the last 2 months of the year. So we actually ended up positive between November and December through some very active trading and risk management. So I was really pleased with our team and our fund, and we had a nice last quarter of the year last year. This year, we have, which is difficult to do when you're a cryptocurrency fund, but we've spent quite a bit of the time primarily observing ourselves in cash. We're being very careful in this market. I think the one bit of alpha we can bring to our investors is try to sidestep the freight trains when they come along. And you don't know what it's going to look like when you see a bear market until you see one. But this is definitely one. So I think the narratives that have supported crypto over the last year need additional support. It's DeFi or centralized finance. It's the potential for revenue from some of the gaming ecosystems and the decentralized metaverses, which I think kind of had the rug pulled out from them by Facebook and its announcement for a metaverse, or maybe supported, but we don't know yet. There's a lot of projects that looked really optimistic over the last year, but because people in a bear market tend to say, okay, it's great, we gave you all the capital, but where are we going from here? So the realist approach starts coming in. I would just guess, I'm just going to stick a thumb in the wind, we probably have another month or so of this. We probably have a little more time where we are getting to a capitulation point. And it depends on how you look at it. I'm really thrilled to be able to buy Uniswap at $8-something when it was trading 40-something last year. I think there's a ton of opportunities out there now for investors who want to take a little bit of a longer time horizon, but also get some of the multiples and returns that people generally have set up as a set of expectations for crypto, that if you just invest in crypto, you're going to make like 10x every single year or something like that. Obviously, that's false generally. But this certainly is an environment where those type of opportunities are starting to show again.
Yeah, I just looked it up while you were talking on your last appearance, which was October 18th. Bitcoin was a lofty $62,000 exactly.
Yep.
Eric. So yeah, a little bit of sell-off since then. Not quite cut in half, but pretty darn close. So yeah, it's kind of hard to fault you for taking a cash position. Of course, we're in that rarefied air now where we're also seeing rampant inflation. So now cash is losing its value at 10% a year or something along those lines. So you're getting it beset by all sides now, Eric, which is challenging from a money management and from a fund management perspective.
Yeah, we're in a really weird market. I mean, take just today, right? So the last week of both equities and crypto. First, we had this horrible invasion over in Ukraine. And by the way, half of my team is either directly or second generation or married to people who are from Ukraine. And so it's been just something that's hit really hard for our family here at Vellum. But, one of the challenges is that part of the intent of war is to obfuscate your intentions. And I think we really saw that in this episode where the leaders of countries were saying, we have no ill intent at all. And within 24 hours, tanks are rolling across the border. And so I think that makes it even more difficult versus something like COVID, where the virus of COVID wasn't trying to obfuscate what it was. We were trying to understand what it was and get our mental model arranged for what it was. And it was difficult because it's invisible and hard for people to understand and very complex, but it wasn't trying to fool us in any sort of way. So in this context, we have at least one party, maybe two, that are trying to fool the public into thinking certain things about what's going on over there. So the market does weird things. So last week, Thursday night, we had this potential nuclear reactor thing going on in Ukraine. The European markets almost crashed. I mean, they were down 3 and 4% across the major indexes. And then our U.S. market kind of, we sold a little bit. SPOs were down 30 handles, I think. But for the most part, it showed that possibly the U.S. market is going to be a market of last resort and a relief valve to all this. Crypto sold off a little bit, but again, it didn't crash in that same way. It had nothing like the response it had back on the 24th of February. So what we're trying to do as managers is say to ourselves, is this market a risk on or risk off market? Is it playing the game according to the risk metrics? Or is crypto actually starting to mature into that, that vaulted position of what gold is, where it's a reserve of people's store of wealth. It's a reserve that everybody flocks to when risk is really crazy. So far, everything crypto says we're not there yet. It's not gold. We are still in a risk on, risk off environment. It was very neat though, because last week we did see a little departure in crypto in the last couple of days of last week, where there were these rumors going about that potentially the Russians were pushing money into the crypto markets to get it offshore and all this kind of stuff. And that did seem to prop up some of the more mature names in crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of those sorts of things. But that only lasted a couple of days and it went back to the risk on, risk off model. So today is strange because, the European markets sold a little bit yesterday and then they bid themselves back up almost to even some of the indexes at the close. Our futures were down on the overnight. We were actually up for a short period this morning. I was pretty excited about that. I thought this market wants to run. It's going to be a very healthy market. We're going to survive this whole thing. And sure enough, look at us now. And futures on the S&P are down 116 points at the moment. Not particularly great. So I think, and crypto isn't following that aggressively. So there is a bit of separation between the equity risk and crypto, but if we get a real washout in equities, if we get a 5%, 10% down day, or just several consecutive days of capitulation, VIX is hitting, VIX futures, VIX cash is hitting in the 40s and 50s. I would expect to see Bitcoin back down to about 30, 28, 27 again. That's in the realm of possibilities, and it would be a great opportunity at that point.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. We had that discussion on the show last week. A lot of our live listeners were asking, is this, the moment where the Russian whales, because the sanctions were hitting last Monday during showtime, are the Russian whales coming in and gobbling up all the Bitcoin? Is that why we're seeing Bitcoin pop? You're right. We did see that it was about 24, maybe 48 hours. All the rumors of the Russian oligarchs switching everything to Bitcoin were flying fast and furious. Yeah, a little bit less so now. And Eric, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that Putin was lying when he said he rolled tanks to hunt down Nazis in Ukraine? There were no Nazis there. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're laying down, sir, to me.
He should have put it on the blockchain.
Yeah, and he also invaded to demilitarize Ukraine. So he sent thousands of troops in to demilitarize the area, because that's exactly what you do when you want to demilitarize something. But I digress.
I got to say, there's a little line in Hamilton, if you've seen Hamilton, where King George wants to remind the peasants of his love. That's what it felt like. Putin's there to remind you of his love.
Yes, his historic love for all things Ukraine by slaughtering civilians and everything else. But we won't go down those rabbit holes, listeners. Let's keep on rolling here into the world of Bitcoin volatility. And, we are selling off. Bitcoin has a little bit more, shall we say, equity style skew. We're starting to see a little bit more juice pop into those puts. It's not anywhere near as big as what we're seeing out there in, let's say, an S&P or anything along those lines. But still a little bit more juice to the puts. The calls still have more juice than you're going to see in an equity as well. But intriguing stuff nonetheless. We always say it takes a really protracted sell off to get the vol really popping out here, and also to get the puts starting to pop. And we're seeing the vol up a little bit since our last show. Last week, we were at about a 68 when all the rumors of the Russian oligarchs were flying fast and furious, and Bitcoin was popping then, so vol is actually coming in a little bit. It's back up now to about a 73, up about 5 points. BitVol, which is our friend Simon Ho's measure of kind of 30-day rolling at the money volatility out there in the Bitcoin options on Deribit. So pretty much a Bitcoin VIX effectively. That's pretty much unched from this time last week. It was an 83 last week. It's an 83 again this week. So it shows you not a lot of change in the vol spectrum. We're seeing that out there in the skew as well. Last week, the skew was about a negative 5.4. So negative and still negative this week, a little bit more so. It's about a negative 6.4. Actually, I flipped that. It was last week, it was negative 6.4. This week, a negative 5.4. And BitSkew, Simon's other measure of crypto vol and indeed overall sentiment, his BitSkew measure, again, kind of similar to what we saw with the BitVol. Not a lot of change. Last week it was 94. This week, 93. So pretty much rolling around the same levels. In terms of how much OI there is in the Bitcoin options on Deribit, we have seen a little bit of an uptake on the call side. The calls are still 2-to-1 over the puts out there. The calls are about 112,000 in the Bitcoin options. That's up about 11,000. So we saw a lot more call open interest opening this week than we did on the put side. The puts are shy of 60,000. The puts are about 57,500, up about 1,500. If we do see more aggressive downside, I would expect to see those puts start to tick up, closing inside that 2-to-1 level that they are hovering right about now. It does take a little bit of action to really get those puts lighting it up out there. Not quite seeing it yet. In terms of what we are seeing out there, where are you folks lining up right now from a expiration perspective out here in Bitcoin options? It's still predominantly front month, which is interesting. It's all March. About 64,000 contracts open in March, up about 4,000 from this time last week. We're seeing kind of a confluence of, there's always interest in the quarterlies anyway, whether it's in Bitcoin options, whether it's in ETH options. That's usually where there's a lot of action. That also helps now that March is the front contract, so that little bit of double dose of action out there, which is why March is staying firm. Well ahead of the number 2 spot, which is still a quarterly, which is June, at about 39,300 contracts there. That's up about 4,500. And bringing up the rear, we have September. So it's kind of all quarterlies there. 15,200. It's up a couple of hundred from this time last week. Not a huge change there. The bottom portion of the top 3, not a lot going on there. Let's go to see where you folks are lining up from an overall positioning perspective. What are the top open positions out in Bitcoin options right now? Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Number 5 is the 70,000 strike. Again, it's pretty much outside of one, really. It's all out of the money call strikes here. The 70,000 strike, number 5 here, with about 8,700 contracts open. It's up about 500 from this time last week. Number 4, our only really in the money strike here. It's the 30,000 strike that has about 9,400 contracts open. That's pretty much exactly unchanged from this time last week, so not a lot of action there. Number 3, the 40,000 strike. That has about 11,000 contracts open. So that's also unchanged from this time last week. Number 2, the 50,000 strike. That has about 13,000 contracts open. That's up about 1,000. And the number 1 size position in Bitcoin options right now, it is the 60,000 strike. Has about 14,000 contracts open. It's up about 4,100 from this time last week. You know, Eric, one of the interesting things I've noticed, and it's really come to pass since your last appearance, we saw a lot of the, shall we say, extremely optimistic Bitcoin options positions. You know, the par strike, the 100,000 strike, the 150,000, even the 200,000. Those were dominating the open interest last time we chatted. And they pretty much did all the way through to the end of the year. And then once December expiration rolled off the board, it took a lot of that kind of crazy stuff with it. And we've seen a lot more positioning now in the, I hate to say more relevant, but definitely much more meaningful for our audience strikes, like the 30,000 and 40, things we actually are trading around right now, which is kind of interesting. Have you noticed that as well over the last few months? Maybe a little bit more, shall we say, more realistic positioning out there in the world of Bitcoin options, and anything else catching your eye as we broke down all the skew and volatility in Bitcoin options, sir?
Yeah, I think so. I think relative to the moves, volatility is becoming more efficient in the crypto space, and meaning that it's better to be an option buyer. First couple of years of crypto options, you know, the IVs were very high, and they really overpriced a lot of the moves, which makes sense given that you have this global exchanges, global fractal markets, sometimes it's hard to bring those into arbitrage, into efficiency. So it's better to be an option buyer now than it's ever been in those markets. As far as setting expectations for forward growth, as these things get larger, we do count up and say, hey, Bitcoin's at 2 trillion. It could take it a lot more to get it at 4 trillion or 8 trillion. But I really sense as soon as we get those are probably smart buyers, actually. I don't think that they are radical buyers. I think as soon as we get out of the bear market and start forming up some new expectations, we'll see that kind of thing again.
Let's see what we're seeing out here now in terms of some volume out here. Not a lot going on since our last show. It's kind of been steady, but nothing really blowing the doors off. The most active day on Deribit was March 1st with almost 25,000, about 24,800 contracts. That's, again, even less than it was on our last show. Last time we talked, it was about the 24th of February. It's about 28,000. We've seen days with 37,000 contracts and more going up. So 24,800. Not a huge day. It's not nothing either. It's kind of just been steady pretty much since our last show, as we're in this kind of period of flux out there. In terms of what's going on over there on CME land, let's start with the big dog, the Bitcoin options. Not a hugely active week. The OI actually coming down about 700 points to about 1,500. So 1,500 contracts open right now in the CME Bitcoin options, which is not a heck of a lot. It's down again, 700 contracts. Only 270 trading on Friday, so that gives you a hint of not a lot of action on the big contracts. The futures, same deal. That OI is down about 1,000 since our last show. It's down sub 10,000 now, about 9,600, and only about 6,200 trading on Friday. So it seems like folks aren't that keen on the big stuff right now. They're really looking at all of the little stuff, including the micro Bitcoin futures. The OI there has moved quite a bit as well. It's down to about 13,600, but we saw about 20,000 trading on Friday. The intriguing things about all things micro is that we're about to have some new additions to the party. We've been wondering for a while when they're going to launch micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options. We've had the futures for a little bit. The micro Ether futures just launched on December 6th. Well, I am pleased to say we do now finally have a firm launch date for micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options. That's going to be on March 28th. So just in a few weeks from now, we're going to have those contracts I know a lot of you have been waiting for. We've lost track how many people have asked us over the years since we started this show, hey, where's somewhere I could trade the options here in the U.S.? It's a real venue that I've actually heard of that's got clearing and some backstops to it, not going to vanish tomorrow. And CME certainly fits the bill, but for a lot of reasons, they really weren't viable for a lot of you, including the fact that their contracts were just ridiculously enormous. Now, going the micro route, we finally have the options coming. We're going to have Tim McCourt from CME joining us on the network soon to break down what they're launching, what's coming, what you can expect from it. All sorts of fun. So stay tuned for that. Eric, since the last time we chatted, have you been paying attention to the products over there at CME? And are you perhaps intrigued by the upcoming launches of the micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options, sir?
Well, I think, the micro markets as a whole surprised the exchanges a little bit at how successful they've been. I think, traditional markets like the ES, what happens is when these products grow, the margin required to trade an ES contract grows as well. So as NASDAQ, approached its all-time highs, 15,000 or so, you needed that much more margin to swing that contract. So a lot of retail investors are going to the micros. I think we could see the same thing in crypto. I mean, if Bitcoin goes 100K, how much margin are you going to need, when that thing's moving 6 or 12 or 20% a day or something? I think on a micro contract, it's going to open up the market for a lot of people. I'm really glad for that. I think with the options as well, it's going to provide some different avenues for seeking returns. I would like to see some venues where you can write calls against the crypto you own, and at the same time, stake it and get some yield returns from it. I think there's some possibilities where you could do that and probably get some pretty attractive return rates.
You want to double dip on the income, Eric? I don't know. Let's go knock you crazy now. Just take the covered call and be happy. They don't want
if it's going to be funny money, we might as well do that.
I'm with you. I don't mind getting paid twice for the same position. Let's see. Maybe when I have the CME on here in a couple of weeks, maybe I'll see if I can put that to them, see what they say, Eric. All right. I'll say, Eric wants more income. What can you do for him? Meanwhile, speaking of wanting more, you folks always want more. So let's do it. Let's expand our horizons and explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the ever-expanding altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we break down everything going on outside of the big dog. Except for right now, we break down the top 10 from an overall market cap perspective. And unfortunately for all you Doge and Shiba hodlers, not in the top 10 this week, maybe next week. Number 10 this week is Avalanche with about almost 19.5 billion worth of market cap. Number 9 is Solana, 26.5 million, coming in about an 82 when we kicked off the show. Man, how the mighty have fallen. That one was hard to get below 100, let alone 120 for not that long ago. So, yeah, a lot of downside. Cardano's actually trending right now on Twitter. So that one's seen, shall we say, some interesting downsides. At about 81 cents right now. Still good for number 8 with about 27.3 billion worth of market cap. Number 7 is a good old Luna coin with about 29 billion. Number 6, XRP, 34, almost 35 billion. Number 5, good old USD coin, 52.5 billion. Number 4, it's Binance coin, 61, almost 61.5 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, hanging out there with about 80 billion worth of market cap. You know what number 2 and number 1 are. Number 2 is ETH, just hanging out a little bit north of 300 billion. And number 1 is Bitcoin. Again, a little bit smaller than it was last week, down to about 721 billion worth of market cap. Let's go out to the number 2 right now, which I know is number 1 for a lot of you out there, which is ETH. Again, coming in quite a bit since our last show. We were just 2 points north of 2,800 on our last show. Coming into today's show, we are shy of the 2,500 level now, 2,476 when we kicked off the show. We actually had a nice range. We hit 3,000 back on the first last week. So that's quite the range for ETH on a week. And coming into today's show, again, the low is this morning, right when we kicked off the show, actually, 2,476. So quite the range, over 500 points on the week here for ETH. So interesting stuff. I know a lot of you have been watching ETH, and ever since it tested those highs north of 4,000, have been reevaluating what's been going on out there. Maybe on the dips, you've been buying some out there, now dipping again. Let us know what you're up to out there. Are you buying more at these levels? Are you waiting to retrace to a little bit lower levels? We have seen these levels a couple of times recently, so maybe you bought on the first dip and are waiting for some lower levels. Intriguing stuff out there nonetheless. Let's look at it from a vol perspective. And ETH vol since our last show, up a little bit, up about 4 points. So not a huge swing, but ticking up a bit, up to about an 85. It was 81 on our last show. Skew-wise, we're hanging out at about the same level. We were negative 6.8 on our last show. Coming into today's show, about a negative 6.5, so not much action there. OI perspective out on Deribit, we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the calls. There are about 1.35 million calls open on Deribit right now. It's up about 30,000 from this time last week. Meanwhile, the puts hanging out about exactly 500,000, 502,000 to be precise. That's down about 4,000. They've been hanging out at that level for a while, so not a lot of change out there from an overall ETH options perspective since our last show. Eric, I know you guys watch some ETH when you're not out there watching the big dog that is Bitcoin. What's been catching your eye in the world of Ethereum, which has also had quite the run since the last time you and I chatted, sir?
Indeed, it has. Yeah, there's a big debate going on about ETH relative to the network's capacity to process the transactions that people are hoping to have processed. I think it's become so popular, it's very expensive, and that has caused some people to try to spin up alternative networks or parallel networks, proposing pieces of technology that are going to somehow be an improvement on ETH. Whether those will come to fruition or not, people have to remember all these cryptos that are a very similar operating focus. It's very much like the browser wars of the 90s and early 2000s. It was Internet Explorer, Netscape, all these kind of things. They all basically did the same kind of thing. Some are doing it better than others. Some get you there faster. Some play less ads. Some have a better interface with your existing software. The same thing is true for these crypto things. So ETH, I'm surprised that some of the other, I'd say layer 2s, the other big layer 1s caught up to it as much as they did last year regarding its market cap. But people are still going to make their investments relative to where they know they can get liquidity, and there's a strong view on consensus. So I think ETH is still leading. I've heard people who are deeply embedded inside the industry suggest that we hit 10,000 this year. That's not an improbable suggestion. If we start getting into a positive market atmosphere, I think it would be possible in the next big bull run.
Yeah, it's only double what we hit last time, right? Which ETH has done that before. But you're right. There are some interesting competitors emerging on the horizon to ETH. You know, it seemed like a year ago, all anyone could talk about was ETH, and the flippening and all that stuff. And when is ETH going to become the number one out there? And now you're right. Since then, we've seen, Solana and others really starting to fight their way into the mind share. And those certainly have their proponents out there right now in terms of, which are more efficient, which are quicker, all sorts of benefits and pros and cons out there. So you're right. It's a little bit more, shall we say, contentious in terms of what the future of ETH is versus perhaps the last time you and I chatted. But still an interesting one to look at. Let's go look right now and see what's going on out there in the ETH options. Let's start with an expiration perspective. Where are you folks lining up? It's no mystery that ETH traders tend to like a quarterly as well, and that's pretty much the case again. March dominating the tape out there right now with 691,000 contracts open in March. That's up 87,000 from this time last week. Number 2 is June with 454,000, so we're closing in on 500,000 in June as well. That's up 28,000 from this time last week, and everything else is a distant third. You kind of have to pick your poison. Looks like actually a March weekly, the one expiring this week, just managed to edge out September. They're both around 160-odd thousand contracts out there, so kind of a pick your poison out there for number 3, but March and June, closest quarterly, is still dominating the tape out there in ETH OI. Let's look at where you guys are lining up. What are the size positions from a strike perspective out there right now in ETH option? Let's start from the bottom again. Number 5 is maybe getting back to what Eric was just talking about, the 10K strike. Some folks are believers out there. At the very least, there is size positioning there. That's our number 5 position. That's a newcomer to the top 10. We haven't seen them in there in a little bit. 96,000 contracts are open on the 10,000 strike. Number 4, the even more optimistic 15,000 strike with 105,000 contracts. It's actually down about 1,000 from this time last week. Number 3, if you want optimism, it's the 20,000 strike, listeners. 110,000 contracts are open way up there. Man, 20,000 in ETH. The mind boggles on what it would take to get there. But hey, I said that about Bitcoin at 30,000 when someone was loading up on the 30,000 calls not too long ago, and look how quickly we got there. So it's one of those times when anything could happen in the markets. So 20,000 strike, unched at about 110,000 contracts open there. Number 2, now we finally get to some more relevant strikes. The 4,000 strike that has 112,000 contracts open. It's up about 3,000 from this time last week. And number 1 out there in ETH options, the size, the largest position open in ETH options right now, it is the 5,000 strike. There are 124,000 contracts open there. It's up about 2,000. So not a lot of huge swings this week from an OI perspective, but still interesting. Eric, does any of that surprise you? Or maybe given what you just told me that people are looking for a run to 10K this year, that maybe the fact that the 10,000, 15,000, and 20,000 strikes dominate our top 5 this week, maybe that doesn't surprise you, sir?
Well, I think what we have to start looking at, because both of these ecosystems have become more developed in the last year, is the option trading space and the DeFi and the staking, interest-bearing part of the crypto ecosystem. If I can go out and buy ETH at today's price and I can stake it, and some of these staking, return rates are exceptional. Let's say just for round numbers, I can get 20% on that. If I can take that 20% and go and buy a 7,000 strike, 2x option, I've just created a really interesting synthetic spread that gives me almost similar exposure, but actually could give me a lot more exposure. And I don't have similar downside risk that I would if I was just 2x leverage long. So there's some interesting things you can do if you're playing these ecosystems together. So that the fact that there are people basically structuring these huge trades because they're very big in volume, they're on for a long period of time, the amount of money they represent generally would be more than just 1 or 2 retail individual traders. It makes a lot of sense to me.
And I'm glad you brought up that staking phenomenon, because you're right. That is a different element that we see in the crypto space that we don't really see in the equity option space. So the fact that they can have this alternate income stream effectively and then put that to work again in the options or in the underlying, whatever floats their boat, is an intriguing thing. And I think you're right. Something that probably is playing out in some of these more, shall we say, optimistic strikes in products like ETH and indeed in Bitcoin, which is usually no slouch to the optimistic strikes either. Let's look really quickly out there on the CME front, see what's going on from an ETH perspective. The big ETH futures, not a lot going on there. 3,300 trading on Friday. The OI ticking down almost 1,000 contracts now to about 3,100. Everyone's looking at micro. That's where kind of the action is. And again, the micro ETH futures launched back on December 6th. It seemed like just yesterday we launched those. Interesting. So yeah, we got a few months under our belt now, hence the options coming soon. So that OI is down quite a bit now, down about 25,500. It's down about exactly 20,000 contracts from this time last week. Looks like an expiration kind of rolled off the board. Took a bunch of contracts with it here. 19,000 though, almost 20,000 going up on Friday. So it's become a pretty active contract on the futures front. I can't wait to see what the options do once we launch these things. Before we roll out of the altcoin universe, I know, Eric, when you're not watching all things ETH, there are a few other altcoin lighting up your tape over there. What's been catching your eye of late, sir, in the realm of altcoin?
Well, there's been some interesting news in the last day or so. We had this thing going on with Fantom, which is quite a bit way down the ladder of capitalizations, but
not quite top 10 yet. No,
no, but it's got an interesting story that I think represents risk that we should all pay attention to. But it also says something about this market. The founder apparently in the last day or so decided that he was either exiting crypto or he was exiting his role as a developer founder, and it created panic and mayhem for all the holders of this thing. I think everybody had, visions flashing in their head of a founder escaping out the back door with all the value or something like that. And he later came back and said, no, I just don't want to be the founding developer anymore. There's other things I want to do. And then the price started to recover, but it was down substantially in a very short period of time, 15-18%, I think. And so that's one of the risks of having a semi-decentralized coin where you have these kind of demigod characters that are, the Elon Musk of this thing. And if Elon decides to stop playing, what happens to the rest of the playground? And so we should just be conscious of some of these and their underlying risks, because I do think the individual assets need to be well vetted in understanding their development teams, the feedback loops and incentives for the development teams, and also how their business model, if it isn't such a business model, is sustainable should some of these things shift.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Everyone wants the decentralized nature of the crypto space. That's why they come to it, right? But then you're right. Things like this happen, and all of a sudden they freak out. And it's the kind of the whale effect, right? Everyone's talked about that for ages. The big whales, they can even move around Bitcoin. So they can move Bitcoin pretty easily, let alone some of these smaller outside of the top 10 products like Fantom. If you get the lead developer saying or implying that he's stepping away, you're right. They're going to come for that one pretty hard. So intriguing stuff. I know you've also been watching what's going on over there at Binance with their taking the old school fiat that nobody wants anymore, Eric. It's not cool to have fiat in your back pocket anymore, and allowing you to turn it into crypto. What's been catching your eye over there?
Yeah, so I was really pleased to see that. I know Binance has been working for a long time to start to make crypto more accessible. And this is something that doesn't catch a lot of attention from American buyers, primarily because there's some restrictions using a foreign exchange, again, on their derivatives exchange, for example. But they set up a new fiat-to-crypto payment provider. And it's these little nodes that help people engage the crypto space, move money between regular fiat and crypto, which are going to be so incredibly important going forward. I think on your show, Mark, and in other places, I've complained for years that the problem with crypto is it's too complex, too abstract, too difficult, too risky for people who aren't easily able to engage different sorts of technologies like encryptions and stuff. And it's represented as a solution for everything, but it's in such an immature state that people are having trouble integrating it into very simple things like buying cups of coffee and stuff. So I was really thankful that Binance has put this thing together. I think it's going to be a great part of their business model. I'd like to see more of these come out. One of the reasons, the Russians actually were not moving tons of, assets into crypto is one, that their assets are stuck in whatever they're in before. If you own a steel mill, you can't liquidate it and turn it into Bitcoin. But also, it's not easy to do that. It's not a very simple thing to do that, and that's part of the reason the crypto markets haven't accelerated in their growth curve yet. It's the head space of trying to get people to understand what this all is, but it's also very practical things. Getting Grandpa to move $1,000 onto Coinbase so he can trade it. He doesn't understand what AML and KYC is, and so this is a new process for him. So anything we can do to drop these processes, I'm actually more enthusiastic about these fiat to crypto nodes than many of the other developments in crypto, because I know it sounds so simple, but it's so fundamental. We just have to get this right.
You're right. We don't get a chance to talk about a lot of the developments on Binance because we still can't utilize most of them here in the U.S., right? So it's challenging, but you're right. It is nice to see people breaking down some of these barriers, providing more actual day-to-day use cases. A lot of this stuff is still theoretical for a lot of the people out there, so they can actually transfer it, like you said, into something as basic as a cup of coffee that has an actual utility for people out there. So the more things that can bring us along those lines, I think the better. I agree with you on that. Let's look really quickly at some of the other leading altcoin here. Then we'll get to some of your questions. I already see them popping up in our live chat here. Let's go first to the land of Ripple. We're kind of in this will they, won't they environment for Ripple. It seems like we have been for some time. All these rumors, all the SEC things coming to a head. It's going to be good. And then kind of rallied a bit. Now we're kind of still playing the wait and see game right now. On our last show, we were at about a 75, almost 76 cents. Coming in today's show, about 72.5 cents, or down almost 3.5 cents over the course of the past week. Dogecoin just selling off again. I won't even break down how much that's going down. Litecoin, we've got it at about, looks like 99.5 when we kicked off the show. That's down from 109 on our last show. So down 9, almost 10 handles from this time last week. Cardano, like I mentioned earlier, taking it on the chin, down to about 80, almost 81 cents coming into today's show, or excuse me, coming into our last show, it was at about almost 93. So it's sold off quite a bit over the course of the past week out there. Polkadot, same deal, 1762 last week, about 16.5 bucks this week, off about $1.15 or so. Solana, the one I was just talking about, 96 bucks on our last show, 82.5 right now, down about 13.5 bucks. Again, for a while there, it was very challenging to be able to buy Solana south of 100. So now it's trading at 82.5, and good old Shiba Inu looks like yet another week, listeners, where you're not going to have the Shiba Lambos. I know so many of you are holding out hope for out there. Speaking of your hopes, let's get to some of those right now. It is time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Questions, a portion of the show where we do just that. We answer all of your questions about crypto, and we know all of you have them because everyone does these days. You're not alone. Well, let's go out to the live chat here. Let's go in order. Let's go first to, looks like Options Queen was first. She says, hey, Eric, have the recent sell-offs in crypto along with the equity market, have you less convinced in crypto as a portfolio hedge? That's actually an interesting topic, Eric. I don't think you and I have had a chance to really discuss that. Obviously, you haven't been on in a little bit. We've seen a little bit of a drawdown, shall we say, in the broad equity markets, but also a corresponding sell-off in most of the major crypto assets. And a lot of people got into these markets early on thinking that they were maybe uncorrelated, or at the very least, maybe inversely correlated to equities. And we're seeing right now that is very much not the case. So I'm curious, and it sounds like Options Queen is as well. What role does crypto play right now for someone who has a traditional long, let's say, SPY portfolio? What should they be doing with these assets that seem to move in lockstep with it right now?
Right. So crypto, the most easy way to think of crypto is a high beta tech portfolio. It's high beta because it moves more, and it's basically all based on technology. So when people, frequently say, how much should I invest in crypto? I would say, well, how much are you invested in the NASDAQ right now, or a tech sector specific fund? If you are underweight, or you don't have a lot of investment in that portfolio, or you have a certain strong belief about crypto, you may want to put more into a cryptocurrency portfolio. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that blockchain and distributed autonomous organizations and all the little technology crumbs that are falling out of the blockchain space are going to be part of our economy going forward. And we are still in the very, very, very early stages of this. And so there's a lot of value to be captured by investing in crypto just universally. if you want to think of it as there is no way to think of it as a hedge against equity, but you can also hedge through your allocation strategy. So I would consider maybe investing less in traditional tech and notionally replacing that with a smaller amount of Bitcoin and crypto. And then when the rest of the tech market goes up, most likely crypto markets will go up as well. Now, crypto markets, I have to caveat this because there's some undeveloped things in the crypto markets, such as the regulatory stance about a lot of these things is still an open question. And we may get some news about that rather quickly here in the next couple of weeks, depending on the schedule out of the government. But so there's isolated, unique risk buckets about crypto that you don't see in the regular tech sector. However, I think if Apple, if the FANG stocks, if these things start taking off, if NVIDIA starts ripping, I would imagine we're going to see a proportionally much larger move across the top 10 crypto assets as well. So that might be a way to consider it a hedge of some sort.
I like that, a high beta tech allocation. Some of the crypto heads may not like hearing that. They don't like hearing high beta, right, Eric? But it's hard to argue with the results right now. That's exactly what it is.
It won't always be that way, but that's the way it is now.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's keep on rolling. We've got Frank 1209 in our chat says, Eric, are you still a believer in the quote flippening with ETH? Or do you think one of the competitors like Solana will end up taking over? I don't know, Eric, were you ever a big proponent? Were you one of the big adherents of the quote unquote flippening where, ETH is supposed to take over as the dominant market cap player from Bitcoin? So maybe if you have thoughts on that, share them with us and indeed with Frank. And also, do you think maybe one of these other competitors is going to maybe take the crown?
Well, I'm a really personal believer in innovation. So I would not be surprised if something we haven't necessarily thought of yet comes and wipes the whole field. However, it won't happen overnight. And one of the things about Bitcoin that gives it such dominance in this market is it seems to be that right balance of innovation, usefulness, and simplicity. I think with some of the other digital assets, usefulness is in question. I think in some of the other digital assets, the complexity of what they're proposing to do may not be the most elegant engineering solution. So something else will come along and become more elegant. I think ETH is viable for a number of reasons. I think it's almost an assured thing that we are going to see a reordering of these assets simply because it's very likely at the terminal phase of the cryptocurrency saga, there will be assets out there worth tens of trillions of dollars, right? And if for no other reason, because we've inflated dollars so much at that point, but there will be these enormous assets. So what's the chance of one that's worth $1 trillion flipping over one that's worth $2 trillion at this point on its way to $25 trillion? I think it's a very good possibility. I don't necessarily think it's symbolic or significant. It's gonna spill a lot of ink in the press, but I'm expecting Solana, Avalanche, Polkadot, all these ones in the kind of the next 20 down to rearrange themselves considerably. There are some like XRP that are really fascinating because they have deep market integrations to existing nodes in the banking system. However, they don't necessarily meet the primary tenets of what cryptocurrency sets out to do. Is that going to hold it back? We'll have to wait and see. I mean, there's an expediency versus philosophy problem here. Bitcoin, with the Lightning networks and some of the new technology, really does have a significant position in this market. So I think Bitcoin and Ethereum could be the Apple and Microsoft of the future. They really could be.
A lot to unpack there, listeners. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of our journey this week. Man, what a journey it was. We, of course, hit Bitcoin and ETH, talked about the options, the volatility, the skew, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. Also talked about a bunch of other altcoin and developments out in the universe, the flippening, all sorts of good stuff. If you have questions for the show, hit us up. Let us know if you want to get them answered live. Of course, join us there in the Secret Club. You know where to go to learn more. TheOptionsInsider.com/secret club is the place to go. And before we go, Eric, if folks have more questions for you, maybe they want to check out what you and the team at Vellum have to offer, where should they go? What should they do?
Just visit our website at vellum.capital or send me an email at my last name, Kovalak, Kovalak, at vellum.capital, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
There you go. Check them out. Vellum Capital, VELLUM is the place to go. Also, give them a follow on the old Twitters as well, at Vellum Capital all one word. And of course, you know where to go to check out all these analytics and a whole bunch more. Really, we just scratched the surface on this show. You can spend hours digging through that platform, and I often do. It's over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires, listener. That's going to do it for our broadcast day today, but don't worry. We're coming back at you fast and furious tomorrow, giving you a double dose of content tomorrow. We got the advisors option coming up at 1 p.m. tomorrow. That's going to, of course, give you all the latest in the world of asset management. Volatility. We'll have Matt on to break down all of the earnings, volatility and analysis, and all sorts of good stuff there as well. We'll have a great special guest joining us as well. Followed, speaking of special guests, right after that by our pro Q&A session tomorrow with none other than Mr. Don Schlesinger, the short vol legend himself. Also likes to talk a wee bit of blackjack, so it's going to go deep. It's going to be interesting tomorrow. I think he's coming prepared with a whole bunch of topics, so hopefully we'll have time for your questions as well. Start getting those in quickly if you want to get at Don over there. You know where to go, all of you out there in the secret club. Just use that members hotline. Start getting those questions in. Back again Wednesday, of course. Education Wednesday, Options Playbook Radio, Options Bootcamp. If you're a newcomer to these markets, all the stuff we're talking about here, like skew and volatility, all that stuff is over your head. Don't worry, we've got you covered with our educational programs, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Check those out. You won't be disappointed. Thursday, of course, This Week in Futures, options, all the action in the world of commodities, as well as, of course, a little bit of crypto sneaking in there as well. And episode 2 of the Option Block, Friday Volatility Views. And for all of you folks in the Secret Club, coming back with Options Oddities. And we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.